knows? Could we see the Ramblers getting into the championship game? The Canelo Alvarez situation, I'm not buying a word of it. And speaking of that, look who rolled into the studio tonight from Montero Unboxing. You can see him on the YouTube channel. He even brought me in a T-shirt. Montero Unboxing. He joins us here, Mike Montero. What's up, my friend?
Not much, man. How you doing, Dave? Thanks for having me back, brother.
Can you hear okay in those headphones?
I'm hearing a scrambled signal in the headphones, but I can hear you sitting across from me. That's all that matters, so we're ready to let it rip.
It's always hit and miss around here. So
I know, right? Radio.
You know more about this than I do, and you spar and you box yourself, and we both follow boxing closely over the years. I'm not buying one word of this meat contamination nonsense from Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, there's this gray area with the whole thing because the doctor that runs the lab that performed it or tested the sample that came back said that the amount of clenbuterol in his system falls within the range of contaminated meat cases that we've seen in the past. Yet, at the same time, Alvarez wasn't being tested from the minute the first fight was over last September till mid-February. We don't know what the guy was doing. And these two tests that came back with abnormalities, they were taken February 17th, February 20th. Those were the first two tests conducted by VADA, that's the anti-doping agency. And it was the first two tests of camp for Canelo. So we don't know what he was doing. And sometimes you see these cases where a guy will test negative throughout camp and then test positive right before a fight. That's a red flag. But to have a guy test the first two during camp, there's that gray area. And it really is, which do you believe? Do you believe he had contaminated meat? Now, there have been cases, there have been studies done in recent years that Mexican livestock, there's clenbuterol, about 30% of it. We know this. It's a known thing, and the athletes know about it, and so do Canelo and his handlers. They should have known better. Is that a loophole that a dirty, cheating fighter could use and exploit? Yeah. But it is a valid excuse at the same time. So now what we have is Canelo suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And the director, Bob Bennett, wants to have a meeting on April 10th. And Canelo's people are going to be there. Golovkin's people are going to be there. The fighters should be there. They could call in, but if I were them, I'd fly my butt up there. I'd want to be there live. And then there's going to be experts from the field, and they're going to talk about what should they do. Should they go forward with this fight May 5th, or should they postpone it? Everybody's going to be watching to see what happens.
Well, and from what I understand, the letter that went from VADA to the Alvarez camp, the February 17th test tested 10 times higher than Alberto Contador, who was busted in the Tour de France 8 years ago. The 20th test fell within the parameters of maybe contaminated meat, so that would lead me to believe maybe he was cycling off, maybe he took a masking agent between those 3 days, and that first test tells me, unless, maybe he ate the whole cow, Mike. Maybe he was really hungry that day and ate the whole damn thing.
Maybe he ate the whole damn cow, or maybe it was a super contaminated burrito. Who the hell knows? But you're right. The letter, what happens is when VADA does a test and an abnormality comes back, they send a letter to all the people involved. Both fighters, both fighter teams, the promoters, the whole deal. So that happened. But VADA, they don't adjudicate results, anything like that. They step back, and the authorities that handle boxing, the commissions, the sanctioning organizations, the two promotions themselves, they decide what to do. VADA does not make those letters public. But somebody at ESPN apparently grabbed a hold of it and released it. Now, VADA hasn't gone on record yet saying, yes, that's the official letter. Nobody has, but apparently that is the letter. And it states right there in the letter, I think it was 0.6 nanograms or 600 picograms came up of clenbuterol in that first test, and then it dropped to 0.06 nanograms or 60 picograms. So that does look, it looks like it's cycling off. At the same time, if you did eat contaminated meat, it would take a few days to leave your system. I've talked to a few guys who use clenbuterol. And one thing I've learned since this whole thing happened, everyone's an expert on performance-enhancing drugs and, anti-doping testing. Everyone has an opinion. But most of the people I've talked to say that it takes about 4 to 6 days for it to cycle out of your system, for it to be detectable, I should say. So it falls within, those tests were 3 days apart. Did he take something? Was he cycling off? Those 3 days with the amount that it came out, excreted, it looks pretty suspicious.
And that brings up the question, April 10th. There's 5 people on the Nevada State Athletic Commission board. He's going to have to convince 3 of them, I guess, that it was contaminated meat and that they're going to buy his story now.
And Golovkin's people. Because I don't know if you've heard Golovkin. He went off recently. I really think he's the one.
Were both dirty, right?
Absolutely. He had a lot to say, and I think it was him that put the pressure on Nevada, the authorities there, to do the suspension, because he didn't just call out Canelo, he called out Oscar, as you said, his promoter, but he also called out Bob Bennett, the director of the commission, and said that they've shown favoritism to the superstars in boxing, and not just boxing, but other sports, MMA and stuff like that. But it was Floyd Mayweather before, now Canelo's the guy. And you remember last year when I was there at the post-fight press conference after Adelaide Bird's atrocious scorecard, I laid into Bob Bennett, and the cameras have been on. Everyone's been watching him. And now it's a situation where it's not guys like me or you going after Bob Bennett. It's Gennady Golovkin himself, who is one half of the biggest event that's going to happen there this year. He's got to act. He's got to do something.
That's the best questioning I've ever heard from a reporter at a press conference. We were playing that on the air when you did that.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
stepping up and asking the tough questions like that.
It was.
He didn't like it either.
No. And in fact, there is.
I'm surprised you weren't banned for life from getting a credential.
That's what everyone's asking. Do I have a credential? I don't know yet. If they haven't sent me my confirmation,
yeah.
But we'll find out. But I have not been back to Nevada since. But I have covered events for Golden Boy Promotions, the promoters. So they haven't kicked me out quite yet.
Okay, let's talk about the board here. There's 5 of them, and
okay.
I guess they're going to have to convince 3 of them, I guess, in a 3-2 vote that it was contaminated meat. But I think he should be suspended. And the normal suspension is 6 months to 2 years, I guess, for something like this. But will they have the integrity with all the money on the line here coming up on Cinco de Mayo? This is, what, 8-figure paydays for both fighters. They did 1.3 million pay-per-views last time. It's a boost for the Las Vegas.
It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Will they have the integrity to suspend him and cost Las Vegas all that money?
That's the $100 million, maybe more than that question, right? If I was consulting the commission, what I would do is let's have a 6-month suspension for Canelo, retroactive to the date of the first test, February 17th. 6-month suspension. Let's push the fight back to
September.
I believe the Mexican Independence Day, I think, is Sunday the 16th. So that would mean do the fight just Saturday the 15th. Yeah. Right. And in the meantime, here's the caveat. Both fighters continue full anti-doping testing, the full panel done by VADA at their own expense. So here's what that would do. It would appease the fans who think that Canelo might be dirty. It would also appease Golovkin and his people because they've been calling them out. Everyone would be ensured that 7 months of testing proves there's no cycling on anything going on at all in between camps. We got 2 clean fighters come September. Also, it gives Canelo a chance to redeem himself. Hey guys, I wasn't cheating it. If he really wasn't, this is his chance to prove it. Because if he comes into the ring in September after 7 months of drug testing, looks great, makes weight, he's ripped and jacked like he's been looking the last couple of years because he's looked really, really jacked. And then he goes in there and performs well. Win, lose, or draw. Performs well against Golovkin. I think he redeems himself. And Bob Bennett and the Nevada Commission redeemed themselves to a degree.
Michael Montero from Montero on Boxing also works with me over at UCN Live, Undisputed Champions Network, UCNLive.com. You're going to hang in for another segment with us, right?
Absolutely,
You're not
man.
Rush out of here?
I'm not rushing out of here.
Most guests rush out of here. They can take me for about 1 segment.
It's the contaminated meat you guys have.
Straight from Mexico. We brought it into
That's
Texas
right, yeah.
for you.
Hey.
The Clenbuterol.
I love the contaminated tacos. They had a little extra flavor, a little hot sauce, a little Clenbuterol, good to go.
You're going to walk out of here looking big as a house. The food we serve here. Mike Montero with Dave Smith here at NBC Sports Radio and NBCSportsRadio.com. Kind enough to hang in there for another segment with us, the great Michael Montero, boxing expert, Montero on Boxing. You can check that out on YouTube and UCN Live, Undisputed Champions Network as well. So thanks for hanging in there for one more segment.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Anytime I get to talk boxing, I love it.
We got a heavyweight championship fight coming up Easter weekend, and it's Anthony Parker from New Zealand.
Joseph Parker.
And
Anthony Joshua.
Anthony Joshua, the heavyweight champion of the world from England, against Parker from New Zealand.
Right.
It's fights happening in London, is it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've seen Parker fight before. I thought he might have lost to Huey Fury when they fought.
It was close.
Not impressive, and I think this is going to be an easy fight for Anthony Joshua.
I respectfully disagree, and I'll tell you why.
Let me know.
Parker, he's from New Zealand, but he trains and lives in Las Vegas, so he's been getting good sparring out there. His last 3 fights, he looked lackluster. It wasn't just a Fury fight. A couple fights before that, he looked bad too, and barely won a couple fights. It was his majority decisions. In fact, the fight where he won his title, he barely won. But he's been fat. He's been in the mid to high 240s. Apparently, he's been taking this fight seriously. He knows he's in the fight of his life. He's got his weight down. I am being promised that he's going to weigh under 240 pounds. We will see. But if he's back in the 230s, there was one point when these two guys were prospects coming up, Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, where Parker looked a little better for a while because Joshua got rocked in a couple early fights. There were questions about his chin. Parker's taken some hard punches, never been hurt. And he fought some quality guys pretty soon as a prospect coming up. But, as you mentioned, the Huey Fury fight, he looked bad. The last year or so, he's kind of plateaued. And, of course, Anthony Joshua had that all-time classic fight with Vladimir Klitschko last year, one of the all-time great heavyweights. And his trajectory skyrocketed. They sold out the tickets for this fight in an instant. His last few fights, he's done massive crowds over there. He's a huge star.
All right, we got some buzz in the heavyweight division, finally.
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Now, if Joshua wins, which he probably will coming up.
Yeah, he'll win.
We have an American heavyweight champion in Deontay Wilder. What is he, 40-0 with 39 knockouts? Exciting. He's got the hammer with that right hand. He can get anybody out of there. In trouble in his last fight against Ortiz. Was maybe out on his feet in the 7th round.
Yeah.
Does he have to be more realistic? I've been reading he wants a 50-50 split because they both have belts, but Joshua's the one who's bringing in all the money and who's bringing in all the viewership and the pay-per-views. Nobody knows who Deontay Wilder is here in America. Does he have to go down maybe to 40-60 or 35-65 realistically?
Absolutely. I mean, and also it depends on the location of the fight. If Joshua will come over here and fight in Vegas, where you can put up a lot of money with the Vegas whales, well, maybe then the split changes. If Wilder goes over to the UK, where they can fight at Wembley and do 90,000 plus, well, then Wilder's going to get a bigger piece of the pie. I personally think that those two guys are probably going to fight 2 or 3 times. And I think that people are saying, oh, the fight's not going to happen. They want the fight right now. These things take time. You think, we just talked about Canelo Golovkin. That negotiation took about 1.5 years. These huge fights take a while. So I think the fight will happen next spring. And I think we're kind of having a March Madness in the heavyweight division right now, because you talked about that Ortiz fight for Wilder. That was March 3rd, and that pretty much decided who the number 2 heavyweight in the world was. This fight next week between Joshua and Parker, that's going to we already know Joshua's the number 1 guy. I think it'll be a competitive fight, but I think he beats Parker, and that's it.
You know the fight I want to see? Terence Crawford is fighting Horn coming up here for the welterweight. I think that's going to be target practice for Crawford with the hand speed and everything.
Yeah.
I want to see Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. That's the fight that I want to see almost more than anything.
I think
They're the best pound-for-pound guys in the world.
Yeah. Crawford might be the best pound for pound right now. Vasily Lomachenko might have something to say about that, but those guys are neck and neck. Right now in the welterweight division, we have 3 undefeated Americans. We have Keith Thurman, we have Terence Crawford, we have Errol Spence. These guys are fun, they're exciting, they have good personalities, different kind of personalities. The thing with Errol Spence and Terence Crawford is the promotional situation. That fight's gonna take a while. I think the fight we get before that will be Keith Thurman and Errol Spence, and I think that's a great fight. Yeah. And the winner of that is the clear champion at welterweight.
And maybe Sean Porter and Crawford, maybe another prelim.
Yeah, I think that Crawford just moved to the welterweight division, and his first fight is for a title. But you mentioned Jeff Horn; that's basically going to be manslaughter. Yeah, so he's going to have a welterweight title in a few months, but he's going to have to prove himself against the top 10, the elites of the division, before he earns that fight with Errol Spence.
Now, another thing I wanted to ask you, back to the Canelo Alvarez Triple G thing. Triple G made the claim that Canelo, his muscles were swollen and he looked bigger than he ever had, which is true for the first fight. And then he also said, and you could see the injection marks on him, obviously that he was taking steroids. Now, talking out of his rear end there, or have you seen blown up pictures, and can you make a case that Canelo had some injection marks on him?
It's hard to say because of the internet, and people can edit photos and everything like that. But sometimes your eyes don't lie. And Canelo has looked bigger. He's looked bigger with every fight. Now, playing devil's advocate here, okay? I'm not defending Canelo. I'm not saying he's innocent. But he is 27 years old. He is moving up in weight. When I kept growing into my early 30s, especially if you're moving up in weight. So maybe there's a reason. Maybe that's why there's more muscle. But there have been photos circulating around, and people have forwarded them to Gennady Golovkin, and that's why he went off recently he was actually at his gym working out, and there were some press people there. And he talked about it. On Canelo's abdomen, there were spots that looked like needle marks. And it basically looks like a little pimple. And we've seen with other dopers before, known dopers, that's how it looks when you're injecting. So I don't. It's kind of hard to believe in one way, because who would be that stupid to put an injection in their abdomen right before a weigh-in for a major fight where you have your shirt off, you're up on the scale, everyone sees you. You'd have to be an idiot to do that. But then again, it doesn't look good. And with those 2 positive tests,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Vitamin C, vitamin D, multivitamin injections. That's what I'm doing.
After the weigh-in for the first fight, immediately after the weigh-in, one of his members of his team, I can't think of who it is off the top of my head, put something in Canelo's mouth. It looked like a pill. And now there's all these conspiracy theories. Oh, that must have been some drugs. It could have been a vitamin. We don't know. So again, there's no smoking gun here that says we can prove without any reasonable doubt that this guy's guilty. But there's a lot of circumstantial evidence building up for Canelo. I think this whole thing with the suspension, the commission, all this, it helps promote the fight. It's going to make the fight bigger and better because there's going to be so much tension between the two camps.
Don't you just get the feeling after what happened last time? If this fight goes off as scheduled on Cinco de Mayo, they're going to screw over Triple G. Anything close is going to go Canelo's way. I just get the feeling Triple G is going to get hosed here in the rematch.
If that happens, it'll be absolutely disgusting. Considering everything we've just been talking about, we have what happened for the first fight. We have these 2 positive tests from Canelo, who's looking super huge and more jacked than he's ever looked before. We have these photos on the internet with maybe it's an injection mark, maybe it's a pimple, I don't know. But when you put all that together, combined with Adelaide Bird's atrocious scorecard last September, if anything goes wrong come May 5th, if the fight does happen May 5th, and it probably will, let's be honest, it probably will go forward May 5th. If anything goes wrong, I don't know how Bob Bennett would defend himself. And believe me, I'm going to be there.
Hopefully you're there.
If they give me my credential, I'm going to be there. And as soon as I walk up to the mic, Bob's going to go, oh, man. It's not going to be pretty.
Lead him out. Call for security as soon as he sees you there.
I'm sure I'll be dragged out of there. But I'm going to get some questions out before they drag me out.
Well, this is great stuff. I appreciate you coming in here again, hanging in for 2 segments, the great Mike Montero. So tell us about the YouTube channel and how we can watch it.
Yeah. Please find me on YouTube. It's Montero Unboxing, and all my social media handles, it's the same thing, Montero Unboxing. I do a weekly podcast called The Neutral Corner, which is now available on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. So find that, subscribe, give us a rating, a review. And if you like talking boxing, follow me on Twitter, Montero Unboxing.
And you called me yesterday when we were arranging this, and you said you were just sparring and got knocked around a little bit. And I know your girlfriend loves it when you go in there for free and get punched in the head when you're not making $1 million paydays.
She does not like me sparring. So I do it once a week. I do sparring Saturdays, and we keep it light. And, she's letting me do that. I was thinking about doing some amateur fights, but she talked me out of that.
Ray Ratto, NBC Sports Bay Area, joins us next with Dave Smith here at NBC Sports Radio.